So when this topic, architecture, the new aesthetics was given, the first thing that we thought was to go, what is happening next? But then when we started looking at what aesthetics is, it's not a new thing, it's been there, it's always been there. And it is actually the branch of philosophy that studies with the nature of beauty and taste. And it is about a sense of perception. So we thought, let's explore the basics of aesthetics. And it's done in 3 layers here. So we'll start with the influences that shaped the thoughts and career of the 3 architects here, and the power of these influences on the discourse in Kerala in general, and as well as their own works, and architecture beyond beauty and a visual style, the essence of a building. It is something that should be questioned in, I think, every discourse today. So we'll start with the influences on style. I think it's, the society has always shaped our attachment to certain things. So its aesthetics have always been a result of certain political, social, and literature-based movements. And I think every designer has added their own part, forming their styles. So to start with, it's to Tony. As a viewer and a follower of your work, I think your work lies at the threshold between tropical modernism and elegant curation. And this has influenced modern architecture in Kerala quite a bit. Most of our works have been influenced by Tony's works. So, but what were your influences? How did it all start?
I was in college. We didn't have the social media. No, where now I feel bad for the students now who is bombarded with so much of information that it's quite difficult for them to curate that. There is so much there and so much confusion because of that. At least the time when we were in college, we could focus on something and we could develop further on that. And my influences, I would say, was for me the biggest influence was the traditional architecture of Kerala itself. So I remember even though I was in Manipal, my projects for NASA especially, that is when we spend a lot of time, we had done a study of one of the palaces in Kollam. Then we had done a potter's colony near Palghat. Then later when I went to US and did my master's, again my thesis was on the traditional architecture of Kerala, because I always knew I was going to come back. And of course that time Laurie Baker was a big influence. In Sri Lanka we had Jeffrey Baba, who was a big influence. So we were in a way very clear aesthetically where we were going, and in terms of design where we were going. So initially most of the projects which we did had a huge influence, was greatly influenced by these studies. Fortunately, one of the initial projects I got when I just started my office was the design of a resort, Kumarakam Lake Resort, where a lot of the things which we learned could be used there so the whole proportions and use of the traditional material and everything was put to use, and we enjoyed doing that. And initially, most of my projects were highly influenced by the traditional architecture. But then later on, once we felt that we had a good hold over the proportions and other things, we started experimenting further and taking it further. Thank you.
And I think Nimisha's work is slightly different in this aspect. She's an architect as well as an urban designer, and most of your architecture, or a major part of your architecture, explores public and community perspective. So how did you find yourself there? Is it planned from the beginning of your practice, or you stumbled upon that?
Hello everyone. When I started practicing, even in my childhood, I spent most of the time in the outdoor area more than the inside area. So when I started practicing, I gave equal importance to the built area as well as the outdoor, unbuilt spaces. So when we practice, it's not, people have a notion that architects design the built spaces. It's not that. We give equal importance to the unbuilt spaces as well. So when I started practicing, I had few fundamental principles in mind. So first thing, it is inclusivity, ensuring the public and people's perspective when designing, and ensuring the tool which we use, the technology which we use, it is accessible and it is benefiting the public regardless the background, their ability and their circumstances. Secondly, I try to understand the viewpoints of the people. That is equally important. When we design something, ultimately the end user, that they should be happy. It's not that we have to be adamant to design something. It's just the end user should be happy with what we design the space. And additionally, when we design something, we try to collaborate with different organizations. So to understand the community and when they are in the process, we can better bring better solutions, and that's what I believe. Yeah. So basically, commitment to the inclusivity, to understand the viewpoints, and fostering the collaboration. That is what the key.
So there's one, Tony was saying how it was traditional architecture and whatever was there before us. You were talking about how people and the city or the rural areas influenced you. But when it comes to your work, Goutam's work, I think I've seen a variety of formal typologies. There's a touch of tradition, and there is modern buildings, and even a bit of deconstructivist residential buildings which I've seen. And what influences the aesthetics in your works? As in, is it an end product or it's a larger narrative?
For us, I think we approach architectural aesthetics more as a language, and as like any other language, the more important part is the context, what kind of tone, what kind of character we choose in our language depend upon the context. So, and other two factors which is more important is the idea which we want to communicate and the listener who is actually reading that particular language. So we work mainly on the ideation, the concept level, the strategies, how the building will sustain, how the space will get modulated, how the experience will get modulated. We primarily focus on that. And the language or the style, we actually look into the factors of who is the listening or who is the user, and we try to catch up on that. So it is more like, and the effectivity of that communication depends upon the user and the language we choose. And we can definitely, we try to experiment, we try to mix different languages, we try to come up with something new and fresh and all that. But we try to ensure that there is some kind of common reference point for the viewer, for the user, so that they feel there is a kind of familiarity and they belong in that particular language of aesthetics. So that is our approach.
So speaking of influences, I think most of the three here are just a time before the media became very popular, or social media became extremely popular. And but today the external influences are very heavy. Pinterest and Instagram images actually starts dictating or determining how our work should be. And like Neil Leach argues in his books, An Aesthetics of Architecture, this visual bombardment of a lot of images leads to a culture of cocktails. It's every architecture or everything is a mix of stuff these days. And this seductive imagery actually starts replacing the meaningful discourse, because people just see the image and come to you for a work. But I think in Tony's work it works the other way around, because Tony's work have been the visual imagery reference for most of the other works. Because I remember seeing Pinterest images of your work without knowing it's your work. So I'll ask you the same question to you, where has your work or your style of architecture started restricting you from exploring something new?
Not actually. Actually, it hasn't. Actually, where we evolved from the traditional, learning from the traditions, is like we started looking beyond it in a sense. Like we learned from that, and started, like for example, Kumrakam, when we did at that time, it was totally using recycling a lot of the materials. So today we talk about sustainability. That has become the driving factor in all our practices. So in a way, we started recycling. Many of our works include recycling a lot of the old materials. It also involves the practices like the being environmentally more conscious and trying to cut down on energy use. So automatically in one of the recent projects, which is a very, you can say, more contemporary work, which is the Malabar headquarters, we have the aesthetics of that is addressing the context in terms of the climate and everything. We were facing the west, where we need the openness. At the same time, we needed to cut down the heat which is coming from the west. So we had to create a green buffer to cut down the. So it evolved from that. I mean, by being more aware of the environmental factors, and everything in a way changed that way. I mean, we didn't have to go to the Pinterest or look at what is happening around. We use our common sense and see, one of the big differences today in aesthetics is how open the buildings have become. I think we try to bring in the outside to the inside. And so that is a new change which is happening in our designs. We are integrating the landscape, being more biophilic. All those things change the whole way the buildings are going to look. We're using the new materials in a better way. So it is a learning curve. I think it is a gradual progression from the traditional to learning from that and using the whole learning in a very different way to make the buildings more interesting.
I think since you were the person who was setting trends, I think it was slightly easier on your side. Or I will not say it easier, because I don't think the media has actually influenced people then. But when I talk to Goutham here, actually, when you look at our city, there is a collective aesthetics or anesthetics. I don't know. There's this collective appearance our buildings have, be it its visual form or the interiors. So this collective aesthetics, or the society's collective aesthetics, has it started influencing your work? Not just about the city's buildings, even in the small residential or small scale buildings that.
Actually, yes. Even though if I say no, I think it's an yes, because it's definitely have an influence on our work, and we see architecture as an extension of the culture, or the architectural aesthetics is more like a reflection. So the collective aesthetics does have an influence on that, but to move away and be very critical to that aesthetic part, we try to concentrate more on the collective identity or the collective consciousness, which is kind of a background to the collective aesthetics. So by focusing on that and setting that as our context helps us critically looking into the aesthetics, and rather than being getting influenced more, we can become the influencer. And I think being architect, it's also a responsibility to steer that path and make sure that there is enough content, there is kind of originality and all that. And along with that, you mentioned about the social media. And social media, I think the social media influences are quite, it's happening a lot, and it is bringing a lot of kind of exposure into the client group, and it's actually a positive thing in a way that it is giving options, and when we present new concepts, clients are willing to experiment more. But at the same time, there are a couple of negatives which I felt was, one was the over-importance to the visual side. Now architecture is growingly judged just only based on the visual aspect, regardless or subsiding all other factors of experiential, sensorial and all that qualities. And second thing is, most of the clients now have a lot of references and they come, and although the references might be good, so they want a collage of their product, they are expecting a collage of that references. But as we know, the compositions doesn't work like that. Even in music, we need high note, low note, maybe some unique pieces, then only it becomes a composition. So that way also it has a bad effect. Otherwise, it is bringing a lot of good exposure also, which is a good thing.
I think towards the northern part of Kerala, the public buildings, I think towards the Calicut side, you guys have been doing a lot of public works, which has also started shaping the public aesthetics of the city. And the school which you did, the Karaparambu school which you did, here the question is very different, where if you ask me about my school days, I don't remember the physical form of my school. It was about the small little niche spaces which I enjoyed in it. But I've been to the Karaparambu school and I think it's a beautiful building. And how much does the daily user experience that spatial aesthetics or the formal aesthetics? And how much directive does the government give you when you attempt that project? Because most of the government schools I've seen haven't had an aesthetic beauty as such. Of course, the traditional schools were beautiful, but so how much directive as far as the form or visual aesthetics of the building does the government give actually?
I think formal aesthetics play a crucial role when it comes to architecture, and while designing a public space, like I said, the end user, more than the aesthetics, I give more importance to the function, how the space is connected to each other. But for an intermittent user, the aesthetics is important. Only then they will enter the space. But then when it's a regular user, the space should be very friendly for him. That is what I believe. And when I design the school, we try to observe students. Like you said, you have memories about your school. There are students have their own niches and spaces to spend their time. So when we design each spaces, we give importance how they use the space, how they use the outdoor space, how they spend their time outside the classrooms and all. So we understood that. That's how we designed each spaces. Say library, there is we gave pivoted doors on each side so that the spaces are seamless, and we have a rain harvesting unit next to the library. So what we did is we stepped the rain harvesting unit and we made a storytelling area next to the library so that people can have a dialogue there. Even when we designed a toilet, we have seen a lot of art in toilets. So what we thought is, why can't we encourage these art in students? So we designed, we tried to incorporate a blackboard in the toilet so that people can just draw there, they can express their ideas there. If they want to erase it, they can erase it, and that's how we have designed. And it's a huge success. That became a signature of that school. So we give equal importance to the form as well as the function.
And the government side, like when the project is given to you by the state, does they actually have a visual formal cue, or
No.
they just have a functional economic building?
No, it's up to us. But then due to the, now the technology has advanced, we can show, we have the softwares to show, and yeah, we can, it's very easy to convince them. We can put forth a idea by showing the form and all. So it's, from the government side, it's about the fund, but then from
Economics,
our side, it's about the aesthetics and the function.
Yeah, I think like I said, the seniors in Calicut have set that standards in how the buildings should be. I have noticed that quite a bit towards the north of Kerala, where there are a lot of design buildings, and we are just catching up to this part of the state. We are still catching up on that. And the last part is where, see, there is this time in an era before the printed media became popular. Architecture was used to convey biblical data or events to the illiterate part of the society. The walls had murals or sculptures which started conveying data to the society. And I think at that time, the building was not just a shelter or an event space, it was also a book, an object that started conveying some kind of a knowledge to the society. And how Victor Hugo says, ever since the print media came into being, architecture has lost its value. It's like the death sentence of architecture. It has been purely reduced to a functional aesthetic objects. And I think modernism or the lack of, time to do things, too much necessities have also reduced architecture into a very formal, economic, functional object. So my question, this is for all of you. It is, what is a meaningful discourse? Or beyond the idea of spatial and formal aesthetics, should architecture or our buildings convey a narrative? Should there be a story or a meaning which it should convey beyond just being an object? Can it be an influencer, or can it be a storytelling object? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think the relevance of architecture has reduced, I think, or the architect. I think it has only increased. People are becoming more aware. If not, hopefully they will be, that we can influence. I think the built environment has a huge say on our life. I mean, it affects our everyday life. I mean, in every way. I mean, you are living in that space. So that space has a huge influence on us, which that awareness is not there. How architecture can affect you. That reflects the number of people here. The importance of architecture is not understood by the public, and how it can indirectly shape them. No, for us, the architects can make a huge difference, I think, in the quality of life, in the way they think. I think as designers, when we design a house or a building, it makes a huge change. Sometimes when we do a residence for somebody, I think we change the whole lifestyle, the whole thinking, the whole way they look at something is changed. I think we have such a big influence in their whole lifestyle, or they perceive a space, or how they enjoy art. So many factors, we make big difference. The same thing in a public space. I remember somebody saying that, no, a lot of the issues with the bureaucracy can be changed if we can build good spaces for them. I think you put them in this drab, old buildings, and if you go and see that, no, we don't blame them for the lethargy they're having in their work. So I think if the design changes, it can change the whole way they approach work. We definitely have a huge impact on all that. And it is important in culturally also, no? I think contextually, whenever we design anything, depending on where we do the design, no, we really concerned about the local traditions, and no, we try to incorporate whatever we can do to give them a sense of place. You know, we cannot do buildings which are like have no mooring to any place. I think whenever so those things also, I think architecture can moor you to a place. It can give you a sense of belonging. It has got such a huge influence on the people who are living there. It's the same with a city. When you are doing a planning for a city, if you do a great urban planning, people just don't realize how much difference it can make to their life. So all those things have a huge influence on the people the same way, but people are more aware of literature and art, and somehow the awareness of architecture is not there, and how it can influence their life is not there, and it is important for that awareness to be there. And it is great that when Nimisha did the Karaparamba school in Calicut, the impact it had on the other schools making them aware that architecture can make such a big difference in the student's life. How proud those students are. The whole demand in coming to that school went up. The number of applications to come to that school went up. And if you go there and see the students, they are very proud of their school. The whole, the way they came to the school, they loved coming back to the school. So all those factors, I mean, it has such an impact on people, and somehow that awareness is not there. And even after that, when you see the new government schools which have been put up by the state government, you feel sad that there was no learning after the Nadakav school and the Karaparba school. And it is important for anybody here to go and see these government schools and how that they have been transformed, and the effect it had on the students, and the confidence the students have, and everything. It is important for people to see that. So that shows what architecture, how architecture can make a difference to a society.
What narrative do you think it can? We just need the perspectives of...
Meaningful discourse, in my view, it involves a thoughtful and respectful discussions happening, and where we can have an open dialogue and just strive for understanding. I think IA Calcutta Center, we had set an example where when we design a public space, we sit together, we all architects come together and discuss the ideas. Since it's, we are designing for the public, we sit together and just collect ideas, and we always involve a politician as well. So there we have a visionary politician, an ex-MLA, Pradeep Etten. So he also discussed with the project, and that's how we design. So it's a collective approach we adapt in our design. And that really helped, like Tony said, Karaparma school had set an example for the other schools, and we have seen students are taking the pride when they study in that school. There was a huge difference. The impact the school had made is tremendous. So,
yeah, I think if the question is that should we need a narrative, I think we should for every project. And whether we like it or not, all projects will have a narrative. If we are conscious enough, then maybe we can control that narrative and make sure that narrative is a productive one. And I think that narrative should start or end in an idea of context, because context dictates the language or the kind of development a site should have, and whether we need to make every building a landmark, or to make some buildings blended or some buildings in a different language. All that decision comes from the context, because like again in music, if we try to make every note very individualistic and disconnected, we will end up with a noise. In the same way in architecture also, if we try to make every building a landmark, we will end up as a spatial noise. So it's very critical to look into the context as a main driving force and make that decisions on how to approach a particular building, what kind of language it should have, and all that. And like Tony said, I think that's a very valid point. How the public is getting more and more aware of the profession, and I request media has a huge influence on that. Right now, unfortunately, most of the discussions happening in media is more on the cosmetic part of the architecture. I think maybe it's a time to get beyond that cosmetics and get into the depth and explore other layers from a public perspective as well.
Yes, I think like you said, the discussions are mostly on the cosmetic part. Even when the social media has started coming in and more architecture is being publicized to people, I think it mostly focuses on images, and we don't know what is happening beyond them. So there's time for one more question. Anybody can take it. Can you remember a space in your younger days which was maybe designed or not designed? But I think when we were younger, I don't think we perceived spaces as designed or non-designed. At least I didn't when I was younger. So are there spaces which has influenced you in your younger days, which may or may not be designed?
I remember when I was very, very young, maybe 4 or 5 years old, going to my my Tharavad, and going up the attic, the dark space, and being scared about all the ghosts which are there. That time, I think, those time, there were many more ghosts than now. Nowadays, you don't talk too much about, but that time, every aunts would have stories about how the ghost came. And remember being in this dark attic, and it was such a scary experience. Maybe that would have influenced all the houses which I do now, which doesn't have any such spaces. It has got so much light and openness, and you don't create any more of those spaces. You are more connected with the outside. It is more open. It is connected with nature. So I think, yeah, maybe indirectly those scary moments would have made me design more open, more green and connected spaces. Yeah, no more dark corners in any of the houses. I don't know whether it's good or bad. I think nowadays people say that you need both of it in a house. To have a full experience, you should have some areas which has got the right amount of darkness. So, but unfortunately, because of that bad memories, all my houses are too much light in them.
Could you please repeat the question?
No, is there any space in your younger days which has influenced you before you thought about architecture? Because if you ask me, there are a lot of small niches in my school, or the steps to my terrace of a typical concrete house which had mosses on both sides. I don't think I interpreted it like in the poetic architectural way then, but there was an affinity to the space, and I think it has always influenced when we started practice. So are there such spaces in your memory?
For me, the memory, I think I'm mostly connected to the outdoor spaces. If you're asking about my childhood days, my favorite space is my mother's house, but then not the house, but the orchards behind. Most of the time, I'm on the tree. I will be always on the tree. So I'm a person who loves being on the tree and spend most of the time outside. So even now, I try to incorporate nature. Even people ask me how much you love the plants. People can see even in my social media handle page and all. People can see how much I love my plants and all. I think there's a connection between, yeah, wherever I go, I love this green. Yeah.
I think for me, since my childhood is in a very rural background, my house is not like very decent house or anything. So I think the design space which I usually often encountered was the temples. So temple was kind of a design spaces or the only kind of design spaces which I encountered. And there is a part of my initial school days, there was a part in which the old part was designed and new part was not designed. So the old part, again, it has a rubble wall, huge volume, and again it has a huge influence on me, I think. And beyond that, the unbuilt part, because since I have a very rural background, the nature played a critical role and still plays in making that decisions, because even cows or the sacred spaces, the paddy fields, the openness, how that from that higher ground you look at the paddy, and from the paddy you look at the higher ground, how the landscapes kind of comes into your vision and all that. It has a huge influence, and it still helps me in making a lot of decisions.
I think it's there for everyone. Before your introduction to architecture, you have always been influenced by architecture. I think our habits, like you see, all three of them had ghosts or things they carry forward to the way they live, and that is probably the reason why the public awareness should be more, because any space you build is going to shape either your children or yourself for the coming 20 years. And that decision has to be made based on a logical, thoughtful narrative than a set of images, which I'm not saying images are bad as such, but I think the collage should also be not just images, but a set of experiences and narratives which can take us forward.
Yeah, interestingly, some of the worst experiences you had, which you don't realize as a kid, manifest in a different way when you become an architect.
Yes.
So one of the things is, I remember in our school days, when the 5th, 6th standard and all, when during the break, the first thing you do is run to the toilets. I think you have a whole lot of people running to the toilet. And you have the worst toilets on earth that time. The toilets were the least important space in a school. Yes. And you had very few of them. So that was a very bad experience. Maybe because of that, nowadays when we do a design, the toilets become the most beautiful space. I think for us, toilets are such an important space. Maybe indirectly, those bad experiences has made sure that whenever we do a project, the toilets become a very important part in our design. So it's interesting how some of the traumas you may have had as a kid manifest in a very different way. As an architect, you have the control over that, to better certain things.
Yeah, I think that's probably in most of the buildings, toilets are designed last. It is those influences that take you forward. And I hand to the public if there is something to ask. Yes.
What I want to know is, as architects from Kerala, are they considering making this city to bring back its hallmark of red tiled roofs, not in the old fashioned way but modernized, but bring it back, because that was so striking when I came into Kerala, the red tiled roof against the greenery. So it makes the city look very unique. So I wonder if there is an inclination to do something, to move towards that kind of aesthetic, creation in the city.
It is very contextual in terms of the functionality of the building and all. I mean, every building you cannot. If you force a red tile roof on a 14-story apartment building, it looks very forced on that. It doesn't actually fit in to that context. So, yeah, the red tile roof definitely reflects, our memories of what Kerala architecture was about. But then, you cannot force it on the urban scale. But it will be important, I think, still in certain, what happens in certain tourist areas and all. There are bylaws, there can be bylaws which can state, okay, that the building has to look a certain way. I think if you go to, in the US, if you go to a place like Santa Fe and all, they have very clear guidelines to maintain the character of that place. But the whole of Kerala, we cannot do that. It can be done in specific areas. But within the city itself, there are a lot of other things which can make a city more interesting. I think there can be bylaws which can make the city interesting and not lose the character. In a way, if you go to Boston, it is interesting how they design the city. Wherever on the main roads, the next level of the structure has to be at a certain height, ground plus 1 or 2. Then only the high rises can happen. So that when you're on a street, you still get a feel of a nice, you get the feel of a whole Kerala or whatever you wanted. So things like that can be done, but that is all the work of an urban planner. So generally in India, nobody is aware what urban design is about. Urban design is one of the most important area of design for any cities in any developed countries. And but in India, urban design, people know town planning, people know about architect, landscape, but the most important area of specialization, which is urban design, the public is totally unaware of it. The government is totally unaware. Nobody is aware. The politicians are totally unaware. That is the area of design which can make a city better, for the public. So that is the area which needs a lot of focus, and I think a lot of people, there are a lot of urban designers. India seems to be producing a lot of urban designers, but all of them go to an institution and make more urban designers. You don't actually see the urban designers finally come onto the field. I think it will take another 1 or 2 years before you will see more of the urban designers doing, or the government having the inclination to involve urban designers in city planning.
Like ma'am said, the red tile roof looks really beautiful in Kerala context, but then it's not just the red roof which makes the building beautiful. It has other elements like verandas, the openness, the courtyard, the seamless spaces from open space to indoor spaces. That makes the building beautiful. But then these days the client demands more. We cannot just design a space with a red tile roof with air conditioned space. Modern architecture.
Red tile roof, if you like. What I mean is do it in the modern way, which suits the technology and which suits the comfort of the, but have the color against the green, which causes the city to have a very unique personality.
I think like architecture is very subjective. It depends upon the end user, and we cannot just force the clients to go for, like Tony said, we cannot just use the red tiled roof everywhere. It depends upon the context, and yeah, it's very subjective, ma'am. Yeah, it depends upon the user.
Just adding to what Tony and Nimisha said, I understand personally, like there is that huge, attachment to that kind of architecture, that traditional architecture, and which is very true also. I do also have that kind of attachment. Not only, like Nimisha said, it's not only about that material, it's about the proportions, it's kind of the volume, it's kind of, how that is getting revealed in front of us. And like I said, it's a kind of language which we, kind of dictates. And we can have that, like Tony said, first what we need is an urban design plan for the entire city. And where, depending upon the current value of that, for example, we have East Fort, we have, there are a lot of other historic buildings around this particular Kanakakunnu and all that. So we have certain zones which have that kind of value already embedded in there. So we can focus on those areas and have a different form of urban design guidelines, the material palette and everything we can work. And it has been happening all over the world, as we say. And we can have, we should also have, there are spaces where there need to be spaces for different kind of opportunities. Like new technologies need to be experimented, new forms need to be experimented, new architecture need to come. So how to balance is kind of a larger discussion. And definitely, what ma'am said, it's also part of that collective consciousness or collective identity we are talking about. And I'm sure a lot of people who are right now sitting in this particular hall will have this kind of orientation, and some people might have a different kind of orientation. So this is all part of that collective consciousness, and in a city level discussion, we need to cater all that, and we need to focus and come up with areas where we can have this kind of spaces, where we can celebrate it. Other areas we can, celebrate something else. Then only that diversity will come, and the city will have that kind of, charm.
I'd like to tell you about a change that I've noticed recently, like especially with youngsters. They're confined to their rooms, to their screens, and they don't like light. A very big example of that is my own children. When they come, they can't bear the tube lights. They say, oh, white light, and they want yellow lights. And I've seen many of the children like that. But my question is there a changing trend like that? And last week I went to a curtain and blinds shop, and they were showing me various kinds of curtains. And even there you have this curtain that is 100% blocking out the lights. They were telling me this is a identity of that. So I was wondering if there's a change like that, if there's a change among the youngsters where they don't want light. Especially this question arose in my mind from narrative that he was scared of the dark corners of old houses. Nowadays children they feel more at home with the dark lights. And another question is, in terms of the changing environment and the climate that demands Kerala, especially in Kerala, where the flood situation is very frequent. And so what are your ideas, like how we can, does architecture have a solution for that, like how we should be like? I mean, it is a very grave question, like when often you see the houses being flooded. So there should there be a alternative the architecture can offer?
About the light, we all hate pure white light. That's a fact. Because we don't mind daylight. That's slightly different. I think what we actually see outside and evenings, when the beautiful times in a day, when you have slightly yellower light, not the pure white light. White light for us flattens out a place, visually flattens out a place. So we are also used to the white light from the tube. I don't know. So that is why that issue is coming about the white light. Actually, we do what is called a daylight, which is a balance between the white and yellow. We don't, even too much of yellow is also bad. So there is a daylight which is actually nice for your eyes. It is better for your eyes. So you need to balance depending on the situation. So daylight is more natural light. I think we prefer a natural light. For us, the white light is too artificial. I know it lights up a space, but the space is quality as far as we are concerned. That's why people prefer more and more yellow. And as far as the flood situation, I think best thing is not to build where it is flooding. But then if you don't have a choice, there is you can build on stills and you can design it in such a way that even if it floods, you are safe. In most of the buildings we do, we raise up the whole structure so that even the worst situation you are above the flood level. But today you can't say because how the whole precipitation has changed. I think how much rain is coming in a shorter time. You are helpless. I think your drainages are not going to work. In a city, you cannot blame the city for that. But it is how the patterns of rains have changed. The quantity of rain may be the same, but the volume of rain which comes within a short period has increased. So creating these issues. I think we can talk about planning on stills and this and that and all, but it may not be, we have to just be aware of the situation and design. There are many ways to do that, I think. I think you have to be practical, realistic, use our common sense to see how we can do that. There is no magic solution for that. We have to plan with each of the situation, I think, taking into consideration where it is happening, how much of a issue that is, what is the flood level there. Depending on that, we have to plan. There is no one solution for that. Yeah.
I think also the flood solution has to be addressed much before. We should stop filling our ponds. We should stop paving our grounds with concrete. We should let water flow through the proper channels, which is much before building a house.
Like adding to that, the solution as what we are discussing is a very big question, like how to manage a land, how to manage a flood. And it should come from a larger planning perspective where, first we need to understand the character of our land. We need to understand we have a high land, we have a midland, then we have a lowland, then we have valleys, rivers, and we need to first create a land use, understanding where to build and where not to build. Right now the problem is we have a one blanket policy for the entire Kerala. Our landscapes are different, our entire habitations, everything is different, but we have one single blanket policy. Now that needs to change, and by that change we can come up with areas where we can build, which will definitely reduce the available land for build. It will affect the real estate and all that, but we can have a longer sustenance in terms of, climatic resilience and all that. Then we will decide on the architecture how to build there. Right now, we don't have that larger context in place. That's why we are, stumbling upon the smaller solution. We need to start that solution from a much larger scale.